Hello and welcome. This is my discussion of Higurashi Chapter 3, Tsumihoroboshi. Hopefully that was in perfect Nipponese. Anyway, if you're here because of the recently released anime adaptation of Higurashi, you're in the wrong place. And why are you watching the anime adaptation if you haven't read the visual novel? Anyway, this chapter is absolutely, so far, my favorite chapter. But before I get into why the chapter is good, the things that I like about the chapter, and even what happens, I have to lay out my major criticism that I've been saying this whole time, is that Higurashi, or whatever the author's name is, he needed a fucking editor for this visual novel. Because, and this is a spoiler, I mean, it's chapter 6 at this point. Why the fuck are you listening if you if you cared about spoilers? But there's a moment later on in the story where there is a ticking timer that a bad thing is going to happen after a set amount of minutes. And for some god-awful reason, the visual novel decides to waste about 10 minutes of the reader's time explaining that gas is dangerous. Now, as an American, most Americans have access to vehicles, and they know what gas is, and they know it's dangerous. Japanese, they don't, not as many of them drive, I understand. So, maybe they don't know what gas is? I don't know. I have no idea why, but there's this huge dilemma about, like, oh, is it a 18-liter tank of gasoline or is it a 5-liter tank of gasoline? And it's like, dude, the children are doused in gasoline. It doesn't matter if it's 18 liters or 5 liters. They're gonna fucking burn and die if they start on fire. It's the difference between getting shot by a shotgun and getting shot by a 50 cal sniper. Like, you're probably gonna get blown away no matter what. Like, what the fuck, dog? I don't know. I have to lay that criticism out there at the beginning, is that Higurashi has one big problem with the visual novel, and that it just constantly fucking indulges in these kind of, like, stupid explanations of, like, really obvious things, and it doesn't really get better depending on the character's perspective. It's solely the author's whim, and it's so annoying. I mean, obviously it's written from the author's whim, but, like, he just needed somebody to just slap him across the face and be like, no, edit this shit out. People know what gasoline is. We don't need to explain this. I graduated high school, okay? I mean, I feel like high school, you kind of learn stuff about flames and shit, right? Okay, that's pretty much my only criticism of this arc. The ending was okay. The ending is definitely a much more visual ending than any other of the other chapters. Oh, where do we begin? So the chapter starts off and Rena is on top of a car doing a curtsy, and she's basically about to explain why she committed this sin. I think it's pretty vaguely alluded to at this point. And that's the kind of inciting incident, or something that kind of builds the initial interest of the viewer, the hook for this chapter. And then you basically spend the next chapters within this chapter where you're learning what happened. You basically, that was from the future, and then we flash back to the past and we get to see what happened. So what happened? The long and short of it is, Rena has some trauma related to her parents' divorce. A new woman is in Rena's dad's life, and Rena's dad has quite a bit amount of money. I think he's got, like, was it 1,000,000 yen or like 10 million yen? I don't know. He's got a decent amount of Japanese money. They make that pretty clear in the visual novel. And this is another part where the story is a little convenient, but the visual novel, it makes a little bit more sense. In the anime, it was garbage. But anyway, basically, they're having, like, Rena and Keiichi have this epic water gun fight. And this was actually one of the slice of life scenes that I didn't mind reading. Although there's one part of it where the thing that was stated in the anime was wrong, but I'll probably criticize that later on. I don't know why I'm talking about the anime. I watched it recently and it was fucking garbage. It doesn't do this arc justice, because this arc is so fucking powerful. My god, the music is so fucking good. And I added a bunch of the tracks to the playlist I have for Higurashi, so hopefully they'll come through in a way that doesn't drown out my voice, but then at the same time you can still get a sense of the soundtrack for this chapter. So Rena and Keiichi have this epic water gun fight, and I think they both don't know who got the other one, so they're both deemed the winner. And then the ending result is that Sadako, Mion, and Rika both have to dress in like soft, slutty outfits. Like, it's just kind of like the humiliation result of losing one of the club activity games. And Rena's like super happy in the picture there, you can see. And all that's pretty funny. And Rena runs into Rina, Rina is the woman that's trying to move in on Rena's like life. She's trying to become her kind of surrogate mom. I mean, she's trying to get it with her dad. I don't know if she's trying to become her mom per se, but she's pretending to be nice. She's a very fake character. And Rina, she has pink hair. She actually behaves a lot like Miyu Takano. So I thought there was an interesting kind of comparison. And they're drawn very similar too. Very sleek, saggy boobs. I mean, they're drawn the same way in the console. I don't know if they're drawn the same. They're not really drawn the same in the original artwork, and I think that's what matters. But then again, the original artwork is dog shit, so who cares? But Rena runs into her, and at first you kind of don't know who she is, but she offers to buy Rena some things, and you're like, oh, well, she might be a horrible Karen because she's trying to get into a restaurant that has a special private event going on, and she's mad that she can't get in. And it's like, dude, just like fucking read the room, bitch. But she offers to buy Rena some cake. So she has some fake empathy, at least. Anyway, later on, Rena is seen again at a restaurant where Rena like had to go into Okinomiwa to like pick up a jacket because Rena is like improving Rena's dad's life by like kind of, having sex with him and being emotionally available for him and kind of doting on him emotionally, and then he dotes on her financially, so they kind of like help each other out. And then Rena like has to go into town to pick up a jacket or some stupid shit that they had convinced her to, like Rena had convinced the dad to buy, and then the jacket's not ready, so Rena like goes to this cafe, and Rena is there with another man, and the other man is fucking Sadako's uncle, Teppei Hojo. And man, if you thought Hojo was a bad guy when he was beating Sadako, turns out Hojo's even a worse guy. Basically what Rena and Hojo are doing is they're setting up these blackmail extortion schemes against people, and then they're getting them to take like bad loans to pay off the extortion scheme so that they're even further in debt to the people who are extorting them. And Rena overhears this, and at the same time Shion comes in with her bodyguard, which I forget his name, the big tall guy. And Rena like asks like, oh, who's that woman? And he's like, oh, like the Shion's bodyguard, that big tall guy. He's like, oh, Hojo, that's Rena's pimp. And it's like, oh shit, like he just flat out comes out and says it. And like that's what I suspected. And I suspected like, oh, Rena's dad is like such a, he's so desperate and vulnerable that like he's fallen in love with a prostitute. And there's nothing wrong with sex work. I'm just reporting what is in the visual novel. Frankly, I don't know, sex work's kind of weird to me, but that's more of a cultural thing that I feel, as opposed to like a moral condemnation. I'm not passing any judgment in that way. But in the visual novel, Rena is portrayed as a bad woman, Not because she does the sex, but because she does the blackmail. But in the visual novel, they translated as Badger Game, which is just a fail localization. It's blackmail. Nobody has ever heard of a Badger Game. It's always blackmail. That's what it is. The modern use of the term of extorting somebody for money based on, say, revealing sexual information is blackmail. It's not a Badger Game. Like, maybe in the fucking, like, 1800s people use that term, but not today. So, Rena basically discovers that, like, you know, her father's relationship is a fake, but she doesn't even care so much about that. She cares more about the fact that, like, her family dynamic is going to be disrupted again, and she didn't do anything about it the first time. So the first time, Rena has, like, all these flashbacks while this is going on about, like, her mom, and her mom was, like, taking her around and doting on her because her mom was very successful, and Rena's dad sacrificed for their relationship so they could move somewhere else so that the mom could be even more successful, and she was, but the dad wasn't able to, like, be as successful. You know, they were both in the same field, so basically the dad sacrificed for the relationship for the mom's success, and the mom was very successful, and then she basically used the money to, like, kind of buy Rena's favor. And then she found another man, and then she's like, oh, do you remember that guy we, like, hung out with at the movie theater? Like, do you like him? Like, would you like him as a new dad? Like, and then, you know, the mom drops, like, oh no, I have to get married to him. Like, I'm pregnant. And then that, like, destroys Rena. Because, like, there's just no hope for reconciliation. You can't go back. And Rena just, like, does not want anything to do with her mom. She just cuts her out completely. And she basically goes crazy and develops this kind of, like, problem where she develops this delusion that she needs to go back to Hinamizawa, and that'll make things better. And there's a bunch of tips in this chapter that kind of confirm that like, oh yeah, she has these ideas where she thinks she's possessed with these, like, maggot blood disease, and she wants to go back to Hinamizawa, and then, like, she'll feel like that'll, like, quell the disease that she thinks she has, which after this after this chapter, she honestly might have that. That might be a real thing. Ugh. I don't know what the truth is in this game anymore, or what the magical parts of it are. The final tips extra is pretty interesting. But anyway, as you can imagine, Rena failed to do anything the first time her family was torn apart, and that left a horrible scar on her emotionally. This time she's going to do something. But the visual novel is very distinct in what is happening, and it plays with the idea that Rena is both aware and unaware of her subconscious motivations. So in the anime, for instance, it makes it, like, really obvious that, like, Rena is trying to lure Rina out to the junkyard to kill her. In the visual novel, what happens is Rena comes home, and Rina and her dad are there, and she's like, oh, I don't want to see them together. I don't want to see this. I don't want to talk about them. I don't want to pretend anymore. I just want to leave. So Rena goes to the junkyard because Rena has set up like a hidey hole there. Like, there's a van that she set up with, like, a blanket, so that somewhere that she can go to, like, get away from, like, seeing that dynamic, and, like, from seeing her lazy dad and all this other shit, to, like, kind of get away from the stress, basically. So Rena's like, oh, I had to get out of there, and she, like, basically is like, okay, goodbye, but, like, Rina clearly wants to talk to Rena about something, so Rina, like, basically goes after her and follows her to the junkyard, and Rina says, like, oh, like, she's pretending to be nice, and she's like, oh, what do you think about, like, you know, us getting together? And then she says the line, she says that she's pregnant, and Rena's like, I'm not gonna let you marry my dad. And it's really tense, and the conversation goes back and forth, and, like, Rena basically reveals that she, like, knows Rina's scam, and she's gonna, like, tell her dad. And Rina, being, you know, somebody who is a woman of loose morals, she tries to, like, choke out Rena. Is she gonna kill her? I don't know, but she probably would have, because all Rina really cares about is money as far as we've seen. She seems to be a pretty vacuous individual. Anyway, Rena goes sicko mode and kills Rina. And boy, I think she chops up the body too at this point. So part of the Badger game, the blackmail scheme, was that Rina was going to stay over at Rena's house in bed with Rena's dad, and then Hojo, the husband to Rina, was going to come in and find them. And then the idea would have been that Rena's dad would pay them an amount of money to keep all this under the rug. And basically they would just bleed him dry of funds until he had nothing left. But Rena killed Rina. So a day goes by and Hojo comes around, but Rina isn't there. And then Rena, I forget how, but she like convinces Hojo to like go with her to the junkyard, and she kills him too. And she chops up their bodies, and I think she puts them in like a fridge in the junkyard. Obviously the fridge isn't working. And then the next day she's gonna go out and she's gonna bury the parts of the bodies, because she couldn't fit the bodies in the fridge. If you ever seen a body, you know how hard it would be to store a body unbroken up in any kind of container that wasn't fit for a human body, because rigor mortis makes things very hard to work with. Anyway, Rina leaves after school, and the club members are like, oh man, well, let's try to play the game without Rena. And they can't really come up with anything, and then they're like, well, let's go help Rena do the thing that she needed to do in the junkyard. Yeah, let's go see her. Come on, yeah, right? This is gonna be a good idea. Oh. So they show up, and then basically we cut forward, and it's like Rena finishing talking about, killing Rina and killing Hojo, and saying that she really doesn't have regrets about it. She never tries to justify it as like, I think, killing bad people. She, I think, justifies it as protecting her family and protecting her kind of sanity. Not so much like her sanity is worth other people dying, but the threat that they posed. And I don't know, they're just bad people, so fuck them, right? But this is where the visual novel hits its first high. And honestly, probably the best moment. I mean, maybe Minagoroshi or Matsura Yoyobuhushi wa, maybe those next two arcs will have really cool moments. But I'm calling it here. This scene is so fucking good. The music is fucking awesome. And it is literally just the culmination of all the bullshit. All the fucking murders, all the deaths, all the suicides, all the pain that everybody has endured over the last, 5 chapters up to this one. And actually even more so, if we consider later spoilers of this chapter. Basically, Keiichi is like, why didn't you ask us for help? And Rena's like, well, I didn't want to ask you guys for help because I saw what happened when Satoshi asked for help last year and nobody helped him. I was new and he talked to me, but I really couldn't help him either. And I didn't feel comfortable helping him. And Mion, offered her sympathies, but that actually hurt him more. Nobody could help Satoshi in his situation getting abused by his aunt. And he asked for help. So Rena saw that last year and she's like, if I'm in a situation where my safety is at risk and I need to do something horrible, I can't ask anybody for help because nobody will be able to help me. And you think like, wow, Rena's making a really good point. Like, why the fuck would you do that? And Keiichi is like arguing back at her that like, he wasn't there last year, that he, so he can't really know about that, but that they're friends with her, and that like, if he was there, that he says, and this part, man, it hits me a little hard. holy shit, he says that he would have killed Satoshi's aunt for him, and he would have done it in 1,500 seconds, which is such a fucking good reference, because that's his call to action. That's the promise he makes to himself when he decides to kill Satoshi / Sadako's uncle in Higurashi. He's like, oh, I'm gonna kill him in 1,500 seconds. He doesn't do that in 1,500 seconds, but that's part of his process, and like in thinking about what he's gonna do in response to learning about the trauma that Sadako has in regards to being abused by her uncle. And so, as the reader, you're thinking like, oh, there's no way Rena can be convinced here, right? Because like everything she's saying is based on her experience of what she saw, and there's just no way to reestablish any kind of hope in the situation. And when Keiichi is like firing back with these arguments that like, if I was there, I would have killed Satoshi's aunt for him, and he would have done it in this way, and these other things that he had done, and Rika like chimes in, and she's kind of like, what? And it happens too. Keiichi's like, I have a memory of something that I haven't done, or an impossible memory of something that I did. And as the reader, as me reading it anyway, I felt like, oh my god, he's remembering. Like, this is a story of time loops. I mean, obviously it was a story of time loops, right? There's nowhere else to make any sense of this, but now here it's fully confirmed that like these are past experiences that the characters have gone through, and Keiichi is remembering one of them at a crucial moment when he's trying to argue, but he can't like fully remember it, but it's motivating him to like save the happy days that they have. And that's not even the strongest part, man. This scene is so fucking good. This scene is everything that Weathering with You wanted to be. That anime movie, Weathering with You, like one of the big tagline, not the tagline, but one of the big kind of like quotes or conversational moments of the film is like, oh, this is the world that we choose, or I would choose you over any blue sky. That's like one of the kind of like takeaway quotes that they use to like kind of put on taglines of things, because that's like one of the plots. She makes the sun come out, but without her, it rains and Tokyo's gonna drown, and then like the boy chooses the girl over sunshine, essentially. And in that movie, that didn't really work, because the main character had no investment in Tokyo not being drowned. He wasn't really even from the area. He was taking a boat into Tokyo. Like, who gives a fuck, Like, if your character has no investment in what they're sacrificing, then it doesn't mean anything. But in this chapter, when Keiichi is, making these declarations of what he would have done for his friends and how much he would have sacrificed, and the things that he's saying that he would do are all true, because those are all things that he had done in previous chapters for his friends. So he's not bullshitting. He's not just trying to convince Rena of something that isn't true. He's fully speaking the truth. And that's when it hits so hard. And then, Rena's saying how like they can't go back to their happy days because she made these choices to, and she kind of like regrets them or something. And Keiichi like comes back with like, no, this is the world you choose. These are the things that you chose to do to protect the safety of your family and the happiness of our future. This is the world that you chose, and that's important, and that's good. And he like keeps hammering on this, and it hits so fucking hard. It was so good. I've never read anything that came nearly as close as being as emotionally effective as that scene was. And it's unfortunate too, because the rest of the chapter lives in that scene's shadow. I actually recorded that scene on auto, and I think I'm gonna upload it just because I feel like it needs to exist in some segmented format where it's isolated from everything else, because it's just so good. I'll probably link to it in this video. But holy fuck, that scene was so good. My god, it's 10 out of 10. And the culmination of that scene is that, you know, Keiichi, you know, convinces, like every character goes through and admits the wrongs that they did that created distrust. Because one of the theories about what happens every chapter is like one character gets isolated and then they became paranoid and then they do something bad, or somebody does something bad, and then everything goes to shit. That is a consistent theme that happens every chapter. And in this one, you're like, oh no, Rena is going down that route. Rena killed some people and now she's gonna like go crazy, and that's how it's gonna end. It's like Rena's gonna kill everybody, right? And this is the part where Keiichi's like fighting back against the script, essentially, against the inevitability, against what usually happens. And Keiichi like motivates everybody to like try, basically, to reveal their regrets. You know, Mion says that she wished that she did more for Satoshi, and, you know, that she would do something for Rena, and she does do something for Rena. Mia in this chapter are pretty weak. Sadako this chapter pretty weak. Rika, this is a Rika Keiichi Rena chapter. But they all come forth with the things that they felt guilty about, and they all apologize, and they basically all, you know, they take, like, Rika comes up, Sadako comes up, Mion comes up, and they're all holding hands, and then even in this final moment where you think like, oh, like this is it, like it's gonna be like, you know, they're all gonna hold hands and, you know, promise to never lose faith in each other, essentially. And you would think like it would, like you're there, like we got it, Rena's gonna do it, and Rena like breaks down, and she's like, you know, she just killed 2 people. You know, like murdering people changes you. And Rena, like, she doesn't feel like she can be forgiven. And like it's kind of like that quote from that like American general where he's like, you know, I'm pleading you with tears in my eyes. Like Keiichi's like shouting at her, you know, crying, because like the beginning of this whole conversation started with Keiichi saying that Rena's crying, like, you're crying right now. And then after you finish this chapter, you get an achievement that says you're crying right now. And it's like, I couldn't imagine anybody who read through it and didn't tear up a little bit, because it's so emotionally effective. It's so fucking strong. And still Rena doesn't believe that she can be forgiven, because she got found out of like what she did. Like the other people, like they only had rumors of it, like they didn't quite know what was going on. But in Rena's case, like they basically like walked in on her, like trying to dispose some bodies, you know, like there's a great deal of shame in being found out of what you did in that way. And Rena isn't able to go along with this forgiveness. And like Keiichi, like, eventually is able to break through to her, you know, after like, you know, shouting at her so much. And it's just so good. It's such a good scene. Really, the chapter should have just ended there. It really didn't need the rest of it. And by chapter, I mean that specific sub-chapter in this chapter that is Tsumihoroboshi. I don't know why they called these chapters. They should have just called them books or something. Maybe I should refer to it as the arc. But anyway, the chapter goes on. They like bury the bodies, and there's like one quote from Keiichi that's like, "Oh, Mion was really good at knowing where to place bodies or something." And I was like, "Oh, interesting. Huh? What about that?" So after this point, as you can imagine, things don't go well, but they don't go bad either. Basically, Mio shows up, Mio Takano, the nurse lady, and she gives Rena one of her scrapbooks, and Rena tells Mio about like her maggot blood disease and how she met Oyashiro-sama and that he like protected her for a little bit longer so that she could get back to Hinamizawa where the maggot blood disease wouldn't like make her go crazy. And that, so she believes in this disease, and then Mio gives her a scrapbook, and in the scrapbook it has a bunch of insanity in it. Basically, in the scrapbook, the conspiracy theory of Hinamizawa is that an alien spaceship crash landed in the swamp, in the Onagafuchi swamp, and the alien spaceship and the alien brought a bacteria disease that infected the local population that made them go crazy and act like demons. So that's why they got the myth of Hinamizawa being a demon village and being used to being called Onagafuchi. But they changed the name during the Meiji Restoration that took away a lot of the cultural aspects of rural areas in Japan. So Mio thinks that these myths are real things, and the real thing is that aliens came, or an alien came, and that alien was Oyashiro-sama, and the alien was able to like tell them to like not go to other villages, basically do like lockdown kind of shit, like don't let people in the village and don't go outside the village, because they all have a disease that only is able to be controlled by staying in that particular climate, kind of like people who have who don't have allergic reactions when they go to certain climates, I guess. I don't know, I don't have hay fever or anything like that, but I guess that's a thing. So yeah, all that sounds fucking crazy, right? That sounds really crazy. Basically, Rena gets these scrapbooks and she starts going fucking crazier and crazier, and we have a lot of perspectives of her, and she's like talking to Keiichi, and Keiichi like promised to be on Rena's side, and he follows through with that. And then at one point he kind of like comes to Mion and he's like, Mion, what's up with the bodies being moved, and also are you guys like holding aliens hostage or something? And then Mion just kind of laughs, and she explains that like they moved the bodies because the forestry group was gonna like do cleaning in that area that summer, and they would have found the bodies, which was something that I thought of when they were hiding the bodies there. I was like, oh, the forestry group's gonna clean that this summer, they're gonna get found out, so this really isn't a long-term solution. But then Mion heard about it and she did something about it, and that's why the bodies were gone. But when Rena discovers this, she like goes crazy, which also that tells us that Mion, I mean, obviously Mion knew that Keiichi killed Teppei, but a lot more people had to have known that Keiichi killed Teppei in Higurashi, because they moved his body that night. So like Keiichi buried the body, and then Mion must have had like, you know, whoever a part of, you know, the Sonozaki family, you know, like dig that body up and then bury and then put it in the well, because it was moved really fast, and they must have known about it because Keiichi, you know, asked Mion to take Sadako to the Wadaganashi festival. But so we get some confirmations of like things that happened in the past in this chapter. And another funny thing is that also in Higurashi, because that arc started with a woman dying, and then Teppei moves back to Hinamizawa, I'm pretty sure the woman who died was Rina, because Teppei lost his like prostitute, he lost his income, he had to like move back home and find a maid, which was Sadako. At least that's what I think happened. Not really sure, but it makes sense, right? So basically Rena, like, despite like the soul bonding moment that happens in the first third of the chapter, Rena like just can't get rid of her paranoia, because she has like a she has a Hinamizawa problem. Like, she has some kind of delusion or paranoia or something. She has the same paranoia that Keiichi had in the first chapter. And she basically goes fucking crazy, tries to get Oishi in on it, and Oishi like meets with Mion, and then Mion basically kind of exposes me like the scrapbooks, because like Mio Takano dies and Tomitake die again, and it's like, okay, how did they die this time? And nobody else really disappears from the Wataganashi kind of event other than those two. But Oishi kind of feeds into Rena's paranoia, and he tells her that, like, oh yeah, Mio, she was walking around. Her autopsy said that she died the day before. And then, much later in this chapter, in this arc, I mean, Oishi is talking with his coworker, and then Oishi's kind of like, oh, well, I did tell her these things. And the guy's like, oh, you idiot, why would you tell her that? Of course she would, like, you know, believe that you were like feeding into her like paranoid delusions by telling her that there was a corpse walking around town and shit. Like, what the fuck? You know, so like, it's less likely that, you know, Mio Takano was actually a corpse. It seems like they just made a minor mistake on the death certificate or the autopsy report or whatever. So the closing part of the chapter is Rena sets up a gasoline bomb to blow the school up. She tricks the teacher to leave, so it's just the children. And Rena has Keiichi tie up all of the students with jump rope. And she basically wants Oishi to like go and investigate the Sonozaki main house and go investigate the clinic for, you know, secret labs and shit like that. And obviously that doesn't happen. And there's like this like back and forth with like Keiichi and Oishi like gives him like a earpiece to like listen into so he can like communicate with him. And eventually they're able to kind of like get Rena out of the room, and then Keiichi is able to like communicate back with them, and they realize that there's like a bomb set up, and that this is like when the arc starts getting good again, is that this fucking scene was cool. It's very short, and it's not explicitly written this way, but basically Rena is like about to come and stop Keiichi. Oopsie, hit the mic. Rena is about to come and stop Keiichi from like going and like finding the bomb, or like wherever like the timer is. And Rika meets Rena between them, and she turns to Keiichi and she's like makes this statement that's like, I've died for you 100 times, or I've died for you this way 100 times. And then she turns, and then she's like, but I'm not just going to die accepting it or something. And basically the sentiment is like, I've died for you 100 times, but I'm going to fight for you this time. And like Rika like has faith again. And that's like an interesting dilemma, because in one of the extra tips scenes in this arc, Rika was having a conversation with herself, and the Rika that we know has a much more mature voice. The real Rika, I think. And then the Rika that we hear is named question marks, and she's like basically like, oh yeah, you could have faith, you haven't died 100 times or whatever, blah 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 blah, or some shit like that. I don't know, I'm not quite sure, but it seems like Rika's possessed by another person. No, not sure. Maybe that's the person who's causing the loops, because Rika seems to have more memories of the loops than Keiichi. Like, Rika remembers, like, you know, she knows that she's gonna die in a certain day, but Keiichi like is only able to barely grasp one of the loops. That's not entirely true. Actually, he makes a speech to Rena at the beginning of the bomb hostage situation, where he remembers that, and this realization, this is actually sadder than the first 1/3, where like Keiichi is like making this big emotional plea, and that scene wasn't sad, it was just really emotionally powerful. But this part is like really sad, where Keiichi, like, he gets the memories back because he's in a similar situation. He gets the memories back of Onikakushi, the first arc where Keiichi killed his friends. He gets those memories back because he's in a similar situation where he's not crazy, but Rena's crazy, and he understands what Rena did. So what Rena did is that, like, basically Keiichi was like about to kill them, and Keiichi raised the bat up, and the memories that he gets back is that Rena just held her arms out and said, like, please trust me. And then he like bashes her skull, and or he doesn't kill her right there. And as he's like killing her, hitting her on the ground with the baseball bat, she's just repeating the same line, please trust me. And he just like struck her down. And so like these memories come back to him that he killed, and he had just killed Mion before that. Like Rena knew that she was gonna die, and she didn't try to defend herself at all. So like Keiichi is like wrestling with what he did and those memories coming back, and he realizes that the reason that he was able to forgive and love Rena essentially was because Rena made that sacrifice for him in a previous life. Essentially, in a previous loop, Rena made the most bold sacrifice imaginable. It's just opened her arms to him and pleaded for her to trust him, or for him to trust her, yeah, that way. And he killed her. But that had such an emotional impact on him that it lingered, from one loop to another. So he comes to the conclusion that you did that for me, and I was able to have that powerful memory with me now of another time that I don't remember, that I need to do that for you, so that sometime in the future you'll remember it too, and you won't need to be pushed this far. So Keiichi like basically asks for her to strike him down, and she doesn't do it. Then, and that part was like pretty strong, but that wasn't the conclusion the chapter was going for. So some more shenanigans happen. Basically Keiichi and Rena end up on the roof. All the kids end up out of the hostage situation, and Rena and Keiichi, there's a few little lines that are written that make it sound like they are anime superhero characters. Like Keiichi says, like, oh, I could jump off here and land, or I could lift my whole body with 3 fingers, and like he felt light as air. And basically Keiichi and Rena are having this like epic duel of fates on the roof, and everybody's like watching from a distance, and they're all like cheering on, and even Rena and Keiichi are like having fun in this duel, even though they're trying to kill each other. And it gets back to that friendship, and they reminisce about like the water gun duel, and like that's how Keiichi is able to connect with Rena, is to like have this battle together essentially. And Keiichi, he's like, oh, I'm gonna make you a maid. So like it gets even fun, and then Rena's like, oh, like, she's like, I want the same thing. And then Keiichi's like, oh, I don't want to be your maid. And she's like, no, not you be my. Basically she says that she wants to also be his maid. I mean, she literally says that she loves him after this, and she like wins the fight, and then she like cries and falls into his arms, and then the chapter ends. And then the post credits is like she's getting a trial for like, taking a bunch of kids hostage and covering them in gasoline. And then after that, there's like a tips that unlocked, and the tips is in direct response to Keiichi's like final lines, where Keiichi like grabs Rena, and he's like, the script that was written, by demons, we're tossing it out, we're gonna this is like I don't think he says like this is the world we chose, but like they're gonna make a brighter future or whatever. And there's a lot of beautiful imagery that is discussed during the battle that obviously isn't, you can't see it because the CG budget for this is bottom barrel, so there's like nothing visually that you can really like look at and be impressed with, but they try to paint you a pretty good picture, and I think it's pretty cool. And anyway, so it sounds like a good ending. It sounds like nobody killed anybody. The only people who died were two assholes. And sure, Rena did some bad things, but the most beautiful thing happened is that Rena was able to be brought back from the cliffs of madness. She was able to be brought back. Keiichi used his talk no jutsu and used the power of friendship, literally the power of friendship. Now, I gotta be honest, the power of friendship, I think, is the dumbest concept I've ever heard in anything, and I've never seen it actually be used in a way that I was convinced that friendship was the key here. Usually it just seems like, oh, you just needed another person there. It wasn't anything that your friendship did, you know? It was just beneficial to have another person around who was competent. That's usually what it seems to be. But in Higurashi, it really is about the friendship, because it's about the psychological impacts that friendship gives you, and the psychological impacts of not having that friendship. But when you don't have it, you can see how detrimental it is, and that is really true to mental health. So it gets an A+ in accurately representing, how social isolation can lead to, mental problems. Good job. A fucking plus. And it fully convinces me that the power of friendship is a real thing. Holy shit. God damn. It was so fucking good. But basically, despite all the good that was done, the Hinamizawa's disaster still goes off. The gas leaks out of the swamp and everybody dies. And 20 years later, the main character from Arc 4 comes out, and he talks about how there are a lot of interesting questions left after the disaster happened. Namely, how was Mio Takano able to predict a bioterrorism attack before it happened? And why did they put so much concrete over a swamp that holds so much secrets? I don't know. But I feel like Minagoroshi is going to have a lot of answers, because it's about time we get some answers to some of this shit, because we still don't know who's killing Mio Takano. We still don't know who's killing Tomatake. We don't know. And Rika was killed too. Rika was still killed the same way. So there's just so many things that we don't know. And they're happening consistently the same way, despite what the main characters are doing. So there's clearly there really is a greater thing going on, but what the fuck is it? I don't know. But I guess we'll see in Chapter 7, Minagoroshi. I hope I'm saying that right. Fuck, well, whatever. Oh, gotcha. You thought it was over. Turns out a few days later, I actually still have things to say about this chapter. So, one of the interesting things about this chapter is that there is put into the mind of the reader that there wasn't actually a gas leak, and then it really was a Japanese government conspiracy for what happened during the Great Hinamizawa disaster, where everybody supposedly died from a gas leak. And unbeknownst to Akasaki, or whoever that detective is from Tokyo, we actually have evidence that there wasn't a gas leak, because in Tatoragoroshi, Keiichi survives, and they make a strong point to say that Keiichi shouldn't have survived, because the gas should have flown or gone down the area that he was at, because it was a downstream area that was in a valley. I mean, it was under a bridge, so the gas should have gone down that way, because the gas is dense and it's going to go down downstream, essentially. It's like the air version of water. And somehow Keiichi survived. Did somebody put a gas mask on him? I doubt it. I don't think he woke up with a gas mask on or anything like that. So that's a peculiarity. Is this a Jonestown massacre that's going on in Hinamizawa? Somebody's just hitting the trigger and they're all dying? Are they all really infected? And then there's like a kill switch that you can just kill everybody in the town? Is there a Japanese government conspiracy? I feel like if it's a Japanese government conspiracy, that's pretty late in the game. Because in Steins Gate, they set up the conspiracy stuff pretty early. And then they, like, provide proof that, like, yeah, there really is a conspiracy. There really are these people trying to do these experiments that are putting people in walls and turning them into jelly. So none of the work has really been done for a conspiracy where it's the government doing some kind of weird chemical test. That there hasn't really been any work to put that forth. So that's so out of left field. And from my understanding, the mystery is solvable after all the question arcs. I mean, you're probably not going to get it because there's just so many things still missing. But you could, like, guess, I suppose, is what I've read. So if that's the case, then I don't see how there could be a Japanese government conspiracy. Now, the other interesting thing I wanted to bring up is how Rena gets saved at the end of Tsumihoroboshi. And it's actually kind of interesting. It, for what starts off as like this kind of like hostage situation where Rena is beating Mion and gonna kill everybody, the ending of that scene and how Rena is essentially brought back from the cliffs of madness, quite literally, because they end up on a roof, is that they play a club game with her. Like, Rika fights her in the hallway and loses because she's like, 5 years too young. But Rena doesn't kill Rika. Sadako uses traps to like slow Rena down, and then one of the buckets falls on Sadako's head. The scene becomes funny, and they're like almost having fun trying to prevent their friend from killing all of them. And then this culminates in this battle for life and death between Keiichi and Rena, and they're having fun and they're reliving the squirt gun fight at the beginning of the chapter. And that is really excellent theming, because the thing that rebonded the group of friends together was Keiichi's commitment to forgiving his friends and then helping them no matter what they need. And now they're rebonded again through the acts of friendship. They're doing the little traps. They're having cutesy little fights. And Rena and Keiichi are having basically like a Jedi sword fight on the roof. They're not even really trying to kill each other, because if they were, they would. And then when Rena has the chance, I mean, she's enjoying the fighting so much so that she doesn't want to kill Keiichi because she wouldn't be able to fight with him again. And that's so much fun. And then she basically says that she loves him. So it's this really thematically coherent moment at the end of the chapter that brings Rena back to sanity. And I thought that was actually something that was incredibly well done, that isn't actually explicitly referenced or called out. So there are times when the writing is subtle and it's doing something really impressive, and that's one of the times that it really, really achieved that chef's kiss moment. This chapter was, there's a few really good moments. There's a lot of problems with the writing, a lot of wasted time, but when it works, I don't think there's anything as good. Almost, it's just so quality. Those are the two postscript things I had to say. I thought they were pretty interesting and worthy to bring up. So anyway, now I'm actually gone. No more tricks.